has recently joined us for robotic fellowship. He completed his education including MCH at esteemed college CMC Vellore. He continued to work there until 2016. Subsequently, he joined MGR Medical University of Tamil Nadu in Department of Urology as assistant professor. The newer innovative treatment, robotic surgery, has actually provoked him to join Curie. Today's topic he is going to discuss is surgical procedure lithotripsy with stenting. In contrast, with so much of experience, doctor is Dr. Ashok Kumar, who is our second speaker. He is a resident doctor. He is working with us for one year in Curie. He is young, enthusiastic doctor who is going to tell us common medications used in urology, which is going to be very informative for all the medical personnel working in this field. Apart from that, we'll be sharing feedback link and 2 quiz master link in chat. So kindly share your feedback and answer the quiz question. These quiz questions are not for any assessment. It is just to understand how much you people could gain the knowledge with each session, and we'll improvise our subject and the way we produce so that it will be more useful. As we always announced every session and at the beginning of this course, that we are going to have hands-on experience at Curie. Those who would like to join us for 2 weeks program, we are sharing a link today where you have to give all the specification and along with your CV, so that we can select candidates for online interview, and subsequently we'll let you know about joining date. The last date for submission is on 24th. Make sure along with completed form on the link, you submit your CV also, which is vital. Thank you very much. Welcome to today's session. Dr. Shashi Kumar will take over from here. Thank you, sir. म्यूट कर दिया, अरे म्यूट करो ना.
Good afternoon. Today we'll be dealing with two procedures commonly encountered in urology, DJ stenting and lithotripsy. Shall we dive right into it? A ureteral stent is a thin tube placed in the ureter that helps drain urine from the kidney into the bladder. It's commonly made of polyurethanes, silicones, and hydrogels. We are looking at some pictures of double J stents. The arrows are pointing to the two ends of the stent, where it's curled in both ends. That's why it's called a double J stent. With anatomy of the urinary system showing the kidney draining to the bladder through the ureter. This is an image of a double J stent. Shows upper end of the stent in the renal pelvis and the lower end in the ureter, and is placed from the kidney into the urinary bladder through the ureter. Why is the DJ stent used? It helps in unblocking the kidney if a stone or an obstruction is found in the ureter, and occasionally it's done following a procedure, either a pyroplasty or a stone procedure like a percutaneous lymphadenectomy or a ureteroinoscopy. No. What are some of the indications for using a DJ stent? The ureteric calculus, either causing an obstruction with urosepsis or causing raised creatinine, or any surgery for renal and ureteric stones. Surgeries such as ureteroinoscopy, intrarenalscopy, and percutaneous nephrolithotomy. These are the indications: obstruction with urosepsis, a raised creatinine, or a surgery for renal and ureteric colic. This image shows a CT scan of the upper kidney showing upper ureteric stone on the left side. CT scan of the system showing left distal ureteric stone and a left proximal ureteric stone. There's proximal hydroureter nephrosis You can see the ureter is dilated up to the renal pelvis. This is showing a large ureter calculus. The X-ray is showing a large ureter calculus. On the other side is the ultrasound showing hydroureteronephrosis. This is the kidney, and this is a dilated pelvic calyceal system. This is an ultrasound image. There's another investigation called the intravenous urogram, where dye is injected, and you can see the dye coming out through the renal pelvis and getting obstructed here. This is the upper ureteric calculus. When else is a stent inserted? After procedures like pyeloplasty, partial nephrectomy, percutaneous nephrolithotomy, ureterorhinoscopy, and retrograde intrarenal scopies. After all these procedures, a DJ stent is placed. Here, this is an image of pyeloplasty. We see the image A is showing a dilated renal pelvis and with a narrowing at the upper ureter. So that part has been excised and anastomosed, and there's a DJ stent placed within. How is the procedure usually performed? It is either done under spinal or under general anesthesia. In female patients, it can be done under local anesthesia with the sedation. A cystoscope is placed through the urethra into the urinary bladder, and the bladder is inspected, and the ureteric openings are identified, and the stent is placed during surgery by sliding it over a guide wire placed in the ureter. First, the cystoscopy is done. The guide wire is placed in the ureter up to the renal system. Then over there, the stent is placed. We'll just show you a small video on how it is done. So after the placement, this is what we are seeing. A stent has been placed, and this is X-ray after the placement of stent. The upper coil is in the kidney, and the lower coil is in the urinary bladder. What are some of the complications of DJ stenting? Post-op patient can have hematuria, that is blood in urine, or a urinary tract infection. Commonly, it's by the gram-negative organism, E. coli, Klebsiella, or other symptoms can be burning, micturition, and frequency. Flank pain. Patient can have flank pain even after placement of DJ stent because there's vesicoureteral reflux. Urine from the bladder will pass alongside the stent into the kidney, causing pain. There can also be stent migration and displacement and stent encrustation. The picture on the one showing a stent in the bladder is completely displaced into the bladder, and the other stent is showing at the lower end of the stent is a stone. When a stent is placed and it's forgotten, it's not removed at all, calculi can form on the stone. When a stent has been placed many years ago and has been forgotten, it can undergo fragmentation. Here we see that stent has undergone multiple fragmentations. Few fragments are found in the bladder, some in the ureter, and also in the renal system. And a stent has been forgotten for many years, can form large stones. You see it's formed along the renal pelvis as well as in the bladder. Large bladder calculus is formed at the end of the stent. The next topic is on extracorporeal shockwave lithotripsy. What is shockwave lithotripsy? It's one of the most common non-surgical treatment options for kidney stones. Shock waves from outside the body are targeted at a kidney stone. This causes the stone to fragment and pass in urine. The picture shows multiple shock waves targeted on a renal pelvic stone, and the stones are fragmented in multiple pieces and will pass out in the ureter. Why is it called extracorporeal shockwave lithotripsy? Extracorporeal means anything from outside the body. It is not from inside the body, it's from outside the body. So it's called extracorporeal. Shock waves are high energy acoustic pulses. And lithotripsy means, it's a Greek word. Litho means stone and tripsy means crushed. So lithotripsy means crushing the stone. Crushing the stone with shock waves which are from outside the body. Source is from outside the body. Some of the indications for renal stones are ESWL or renal stones up to 2 cm and a ureteric stone up to 1 cm. The picture shows multiple stones, renal pelvic stone as well as upper ureteric stone. These are some of the common sites where lithotripsy is very useful. What are some of the contraindications? Pregnancy is a contraindication because the shock waves can, it can cause urinary infection in the lady, can cause, we have to use x-rays during the focusing of the stone. It can be dangerous for the baby, as well as the shock waves themselves are dangerous for the baby. Bleeding disorders are a contraindication. Patient can have severe hematuria if lithotripsy is used. In the presence of a urinary tract infection, lithotripsy can't be done because patient can go into urosepsis. And a morbidly obese patient can also be one of the contraindications for a lithotripsy because the shock waves may not reach the kidney. They may not be so useful. They may not be so powerful when they get to the kidney at all. This is a machine used for lithotripsy. It's called a lithotripter. What we normally use is called a Dornier HM3 lithotripter. There are 3 types of lithotripters mainly: electromagnetic, electrohydraulic and spark plug, and piezoelectric. This shows a lithotripsy machine. This shows a cushion filled with water, and the person is holding what is the source of the sound waves. How does it act? The source is either electrohydraulic or electromagnetic source. and it's focused onto the kidney through a water medium. The source is outside the body and is getting targeted onto the renal stone. How do they manage to break the stones? How do these shock waves manage to break stones? They cause something called cavitation bubbles and a direct impact on the stone. Cavitation forms multiple bubbles around the urine surrounding the stone, and this causes breakage of the stone. What all does the treatment involve? As we showed in the image, the water-filled cushion is placed behind the kidney. The stone is targeted by fluoroscopy. Fluoroscopy meaning X-rays or by ultrasound. And for renal stone, 1000 to 2000 shock waves are needed to cut the stones. Complete treatment takes about 45 to 60 minutes. What are some of the advantages of lithotripsy? Advantages: there will be no surgical incision, shorter hospital stays, recovery time is reduced. Limitations: it may not be successful all the time. Not all types of stones can be broken by lithotripsy. Usually calcium oxalate, calcium phosphate, and uric acid stones can be broken by lithotripsy. However, cystine stones are resistant to breakage by lithotripsy. Cystine stones are resistant to breakage by lithotripsy. Disadvantages: multiple sessions might be required. It usually will not settle with just one shock, one session of lithotripsy. Multiple sessions need to be given either end of 4 or 5 days or at the end of 1 week. And the stone free rate at the end of 1 month is about 50%, and at the end of 3 months, 75%. So up to 3 months after the treatment, patient can still be passing calculi in urine. Similar to DJ stenting, the complications for lithotripsy are hematuria, urinary tract infection, partial or incomplete fragmentation, intractable pain. Usually the fragments which are broken from the kidney, they pass up to the bladder through the ureter. So that causes severe pain like in a ureteric colic. And there's something called Steinstrasse. If a very large stone is broken and come down into the ureter, it can block the ureter. We are seeing in this picture that stones from the kidney are fragmented and they've come into upper ureter. But each one is like an upper ureteric stone by itself now. So this is called a Steinstrasse. Steinstrasse originates from a German word called, it's a street in Germany. So when calculi after fragmentation are seen like this in the upper ureter, it's called a Steinstrasse. And this image on the left side shows a Steinstrasse in the lower ureter. These are stones which are fragmented from the upper ureter and come down to the lower ureter. This can be troublesome for the patient, can cause severe pain, can cause worsening renal function, and can cause urosepsis. Patient can have fever. So then the only solution for that will be emergency DJ stenting. A stent is placed as a source of relief for the obstruction. We got another video to show how it is done, lithotripsy. Okay. So that's the way it's done. Patient is made to lie on the couch, and the cushion-filled water is placed against the kidney, and the source can either be electrohydraulic or electromechanical source, which is directed on the kidney, and your focusing is done by ultrasound or by fluoroscopy, which is X-rays, and the stone is fragmented from that. If you have any queries, I would like to.
Participants, if you have any questions, please do. Sir, there is a question from Mr. Shahul Hamid. You were able to see? Okay. What is the possibility of functional failure of DJ stent and how to overcome it?
Functional failure meaning depends on indication.
This is
Okay. As for the second question first.
Stent encrustation, when the stent is left in place for a long duration, multiple crystals and the salts get deposited on the stent. So that can mild can form tiny calculi, but if it is a large amount can form large stones like we had shown in the images. That is called the stent encrustation. Functional failure, I mean, that depends on where the stent is placed. Stent is placed for a ureteric stone. If the in an emergency, place for ureteric stone. So, in spite of the stent, if the creatinine is rising or if the urosepsis is there, then we can say functional failure has happened. But it's, I think, quite rare. That is an emergency procedure to overcome that. Functional failure is seen occasionally with patients with CS cervix, carcinoma cervix, because the tumor engulfs the stent over a long duration, causing functional failure and renal function can worsen. But in a ureteric stone, it's quite rare. It's one of the procedures to make sure patient doesn't become sick.
Next question is how to check stent placement and working condition.
Stent placement after the procedure, X-ray is done. In the operation theatre, fluoroscopy, that is multiple X-rays are taken during the procedure and after the procedure. But as an outpatient, to follow up whether stent is in place, we do X-ray.
Any questions? Reason for stent failure.
Reason for stent failure can be either stent migration, either you placed a stent wrongly, or a stent which was placed correctly has migrated, either went up or came down, or whatever is causing the obstruction, like something like a tumor is encasing it and it's crushing the stent from all sides. So then stent failure can happen. But that will be usually seen in something like a CA cervix, where the tumor engulfs the stent fully from all sides.
Next question is, what are the criteria for removing stent?
Stent is just a temporary procedure. So once the reason for placing the stent has been sorted out, like a ureteric stone, once the ureteric stone has been treated, then you go and take out the stent.
Next question is, for urethral stricture, which is the best treatment, stenting or plasty? Urethral stricture, which is the best treatment, stenting or plasty?
Okay, we are talking about ureter here. Ureteric, the DJ stent is placed in the ureter. I think the question says urethral stricture. Urethral stricture is something different altogether. For a ureteric stricture, if it's a small segment stricture, then DJ stent is a good form of treatment. But if a long segment stricture is there in the ureter, then we have to do other procedure like ileal ureter. If multiple strictures like we see in tuberculosis, then a DJ stent is not of much use. Then we'll have to do other procedure, reconstructive procedure, If it's a long segment one, then something called ileal ureter, where the intestine, ileum, is used for interposition, or other flaps like Boari flap, where the bladder, urinary bladder, part of the bladder is taken and a flap is made. Those sort of procedures have to be done. DJ stent is only a temporary, short-term procedure.
Next question is from
Hematuria, how long will be there?
Hematuria it depends on the reason for the hematuria. If the procedure itself has caused hematuria, it will be there for only 1-2 days. But if the other reasons like urinary infection, then urine infection has to be treated. And as long as the stent is there, patient might still have small amounts of bleeding, which is expected. Usually after stent removal, it settles.
part of the question, is it normal?
Yeah, it is normal to have for a few days.
Okay, next question is
After stent, which precautions patients have to take after care?
Stent is usually placed inside the body, so nothing much the patient can do apart from taking adequate fluid intake. That's about it. And if any infection is there, antibiotics have to be taken. You have to control the infection. Occasionally, the placement of the stent can cause severe burning micturition and frequency. So the amount of water intake has to be adjusted according to that.
next question. The lithotripsy suit for
Calcium stone? Does
Yeah,
lithotripsy?
calcium oxalate and phosphate
Can be treated with lithotripsy. Usually for cystine stones, it may not be useful, and uric acid stone will not be localized on X-ray because it will be radiolucent stone. So then that localization has to be done on ultrasound. But calculi which are, as we said, Hounsfield unit greater than 1000, the chances of breakage are much lower. If a Hounsfield unit is less than 1000, whatever type of stone, the very high chance it will break.
next question. How to prevent recurrent urethral stricture?
Again, we are talking about ureteric placement. So they are talking about a different part. Okay, urethra is different from ureter. So if you're talking about ureter, then like we said, DJ stent can help for a short term. But if you're talking about a urethral stricture, I mean, I think we are not addressing that in this talk at all.
Next question is nursing care of patient with DJ stent.
Nursing care definitely patient has to be counseled about a stent. Patient, the treating doctor as well as the resident doctor and the nurse's job to tell the patient there is a stent which has to be removed. There are many cases where the stent has been forgotten and has led to many problems. The stent can migrate, can undergo severe infection, can undergo calculus formation, encrustation, and if it's been left for a long time, the kidney can undergo failure. So patients have been need a nephrectomy. The kidney has to be removed just because the stent has been forgotten. So it is imperative for the doctor, sister, as well as the the patient to know that the stent has been placed and has been removed within usually 4 to 6 weeks.
Next question, is there any dietary
And
pattern?
to be followed, and what are they?
Dietary pattern is just for the prevention of the stone. Prevention of stone is adequate fluid intake, and stone analysis has to be done. Stone analysis, if recurrent stone formation is happening, then only in those patients we do a stone analysis. So depending on that, whether it's oxalate stone or a phosphate stone, whatever intake has been altered according to that. But adequate fluid intake and avoidance of red meat, those are advisable for recurrent stone formers.
Next question, signs of stent displacement, sir.
Stent displacement depends on where it has come. Either it's come in the ureter, and if the stone is above that, then definitely he'll continue to have right loin pain and fever and features of sepsis. But if it's come complete into bladder, I mean, unless you do X-ray, unlikely we'll know. Sometimes we'll see the stent has already come into the urinary passage, come through the urethra, it's come outside. So that definitely can be seen outside also. But until you do X-ray, we will not know.
Next question, what is the teaching to be given to a patient after DJ shut?
Placement.
Yeah, DJ stent, that's what. It's a temporary procedure. There are indications for the procedure. Usually it is a stone or any obstruction of the ureter. So once that is addressed, if it's a temporary procedure, the treatment of the stone has to be done. So that has to be done within 2 to 4 weeks. So after that, the stent will be removed So as long as stent is there, patient must know there is a stent in place and adequate fluid intake.
Are there any questions, participants? If you have any doubts, please do let us know now itself. We will move on to the next session. Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thanks for explaining us about the lithotripsy and stenting. And we'll move on to the second session. Before getting into the second session, I would like to highlight once again about the feedback and the quiz program. So we have shared the feedback link in the chat box. So I request all the participants to kindly fill in the feedback form and also answer the questions. That is, the quiz link has also been shared. That also you please kindly fill those things. Apart from this, there is one more link which we'll be sharing shortly. It is about the hands-on training program which was announced earlier at the start of the session. So we'll share that link. So kindly fill in your details. If you want to get the apply for this, kindly use the link to update your details, and also send your CV to hr@curie.co.in. So we'll be sending you the messages in the chat box in shortly. So now we'll move on to the second session. Dr. Ashok is come to present his topic, common medications in the urology. So over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Ashok. I'm working here in the Curie Hospital as a resident. Okay, let's go into the topic. Can you hear everyone? Kekda.
Participant, can you hear? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, let's go into the presentation. And I'm talking about common urological drugs. Okay. So case one, I'm presenting here one case. 35 years female presented to the OPD complaint of burning micturition, nocturia, one or twice, and cloudy and strange smelling, urination from yesterday itself. Okay, from yesterday. So she was presenting today in the morning and saying these are the complaints. So now what can we do? So we usually examine and send the investigations as a blood and urine. So we have done like CBC, RBS, and urine routine and culture usually for the urinary supposed to be the infections. So in CBC we came to know like there is a elevated ESR is at 10 and the WBC is marginally elevated, and also RBS it's 110, and the urine routine we came to know like WBC 8 to 10 is present there in the microscopically, and pus cells 10 to 15% there. So what is our next step? We now by all this came to know this is a UTI, maybe approximately like a lower urinary tract infection. So for this also we send like a culture and sensitivity. You know, culture and sensitivity will come in 24 hours, but before that we should start antibiotic. Okay. So usually empirically we start the antibiotic like a nitrofurantoin, cefoperazone, sulbactam, and norfloxacin. Nitrofurantoin usually 100 mg BD, and cefoperazone sulbactam it's a IV drug. It's a 1.5 gram or rice and someone. Okay, whatever. Okay, let it be 3 grams BD, and norfloxacin 400 milligram tablet BD. These drugs are commonly given empirically. Okay, and after 24 hours we can know it's a there is a growth or not in the urine. Then in 48 hours we will confirmly know the sensitivity also for the particular found organ, like E. coli may be the 80% of the causes for the urinary tract infection, and also the Klebsiella in some cases, and Staphylococcus saprophyticus also. So for the UTI specifically, we use like antibiotics already I said, and also we should encourage the patient to drink plenty of water, and also alkalizers. When there is a UTI, patient usually hesitate to drink water because there is a severe burning. So we should encourage them to drink, and also we can give the alkalizers to decrease the concentrated urine and also decrease the burning because of that. Occasionally we use like analgesics also we advise. In next case, 40 years old male, okay, presented to the ER, complaints of sudden left loin to groin pain, okay. Also there is a presence of nausea from started after pain, okay, with the associated with the pain. Also he saw like a dark color urine. He says it might be the blood, so we can consider it as a like one episode of hematuria. We evaluate him, he is present to the ER, right? So presented to the ER, so we should evaluate, like we should do immediately investigations and also relieve his pain, okay. When he arrived, like pulse vitals, pulse rate 110, bp 140, 80, 5, and respiratory rate 22, temperature is absolutely normal. So we do some investigations immediately, right? So for the pain, first we give Drotin, okay. Drotin like 40 mg IM or IV, immediately we push. Let's see it is settled or it is settling or not. And also we proceed with CBC, RBS, urine routine, and also culture, but not now immediately. But we can wait for the send and culture and wait for future, like 24 to 48 hours. And also we shift him according to our hospital facility. We usually shift for the CT or availability of ultrasound. We can shift to the ultrasound. So here, what are the results we found? CBC is normal, and the RBS it's 120, and urine routine we found to get like a microscopical erythrocyte seen and also epithelial cells, okay. So what it might be, it's usually like a simple erythrocyte and epithelial cell C. So we can suspect like stone may be there, okay, in the ureter, in the left side, okay, absolutely. Then we shift him to the CTKB usually, and we'll get the result immediately. So if it is that stone found to be 6.5 mm, okay, in our facility, like up to 7 mm, we wait and watch. Watch means we can give like a symptomatic treatment, painkiller, okay, and also like a Drotin and such. Usually we start with the Drotin in the emergency cases. Drotin like a 40 mg IV immediate. Then for the nausea, we can give the antiemetic like a Emisec, okay, 8 mg. Then for the painkiller after Drotin, we can give NSAIDs like ibuprofen, like ketorolac, those drugs also, and tramadol. Finally, we can attempt with the tramadol. It's a opioid drug. It usually responding, okay, and the antiemetic like Amy said we can give. So if we found to have the stone with the 7 mm or 6.5 millimeter, then we should evaluate for the creatinine and urea serum, okay. So creatinine level is normal, so we can wait like 2 to 4 weeks for the stone expulsion with the following drugs. What can we give? Like a Drotin already I said, and also antiemetic 8 mg like Amy said, I said, and the tamsulosin. Tamsulosin I'll explain about the tamsulosin in a while, okay. And also alkalizers can be given, and encourage the patient to take a plenty of water. It's must, okay. If it is if the stone is more than 7 mm means we can see the creat. If it is creat, it's increased, okay, or the pain is not settled, or patient is getting fever, or like that, it's exaggerating the symptom in a while means we can shift him to the OT and remove the stone usually, okay. Then to the here we see the bladder and also the prostate. We just focus here in these muscarinic receptors, alpha-adrenergic receptors, and the 5-alpha reductase enzymes in the prostate. See simply, if it is in the bladder, there is a detrusor muscles present. There is a receptors like M1, M2, M3 receptors are there. Most selective receptors are M3 receptors. So if M3 is activated by our autonomic nervous system, bladder start to shrink or constrict, okay. So if we want to stop the bladder constrict or shrink, we should stop the M3 receptor, okay? And also here the alpha receptors are present. Mostly alpha 1A is most selective in the bladder neck, also in the prostate. Okay, we will see. Okay, just remember these are the receptors present in the bladder and also in the bladder neck and the prostate. Okay, and we will see what it does. Okay, in yeah. So here one more picture. It says M3 is most potent in the bladder, and also when it activated, bladder is start to constrict. And another receptor is a beta 3. When it usually from the sympathetic action, it stops constricting. Okay, that means relaxation of the smooth muscle occur when beta 3 is activated. Okay, let's go. So what is the alpha blocker? Alpha blocker means we are going to block the activity of the receptor, the sensitization of the receptor in the bladder neck and in the prostate. Okay, so these are the blocking sympathetic nervous system mediated contraction in the prostate and the bladder neck. Okay, there are the three types of alpha like receptors present in our body. Like alpha 1A, I said, it's most selective and also most specifically present in the prostate and the urinary bladder. Okay, bladder neck. Okay, it mediates the prostate smooth muscle contraction. And alpha 1B predominant in the human prostate epithelium. It is a human prostate stroma 1A. Okay. Then what is the classification? There are non-selective and selective drugs are there. So in non-selective, there are many drugs. Phenoxybenzamine. It's effective. It's effectively control the symptom, but we should know more non-selective means more complications, because alpha receptors not only present in the bladder or on the prostate, but also in the vessels, blood vessels. So we should consider also in any department we should choose mostly selective drugs, okay, to decrease the side effect. In non-selective, also short-acting drugs are prazosin, alfuzosin, indoramines are the example, and the long-acting alpha 1, terazosin, doxazine, alfuzosin. Okay, sustained release. These are the non-selective. In selective, we should more concentrate. The urological guys should more concentrate on tamsulosin and celedosin. It is most specific. Okay, specifically located in the bladder, neck, and the prostate. Okay, tamsulosin we usually use a dosage as 0.4 mg. Once daily, mostly in the night. Okay, celedosin 8 mg, mostly in the night. It's given. Okay, so where we use this drug, alpha blockers. So we have many label and non-off-label uses. So initial management of the patients with BPH. What does it mean, the BPH? When there is a stromal hyperplasia of the prostate, mostly, then prostate tend to be getting bigger, but it is benign. Okay, we are not talking about the CA prostate. We are talking about benign prostatic hyperplasia. When it gets bigger, there is a urine obstruction. Urine flow will get obstructed. So we try to relax by inhibiting the alpha 1A. Okay, when we inhibit the alpha 1A activity, smooth muscle will be relaxed on the prostate. Okay, also in the bladder neck. And chronic prostatitis, these are the off-label use. Okay, and chronic prostatitis and lower urinary tract symptoms like infrequency, burning, and incomplete voiding. Also, we can use this drug. Okay, and radiation-induced urethritis and medical expulsive therapy of the ureteric stone. When there is a stone present in the like a ureter, we can give this drug tamsulosin and facilitate and also relax the smooth muscles present, okay, in the bladder neck, okay, also in the prostate. So we facilitating the stone passaging. Okay. Okay, then adjunctive therapy. When we do the lithotripsy and we break the stone in the ureter, we facilitate the clearance of the residual stone. Okay. So next we go to the 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. So we should know first what is the use of 5-alpha reductase. Okay, so usually testis produces the testosterone, and 5-alpha reductase converts the testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. Dihydrotestosterone in the prostate. This is prostate, guys. We just focus here. Okay, do not go around here. Just focus here. And DHT is a dihydrotestosterone. It's a very highly specific and highly potent like a drug in the like a prostate. So when we inhibit, we prevent the testosterone conversion to the dihydrotestosterone. So by that we stopping the stimulation of the prostate growth. Okay. So see here, it inhibits the conversion of testosterone to DHT and more potent anti like okay androgen in the prostate. This causes the shrinkage of prostatic epithelium. So we decrease the prostate volume. Okay, so we in benign prostatic enlargement, we make urine flow easily. Okay, usually these drugs should be given in a long period. Okay, some months to see the changes. Okay. So next, anticholinergics. What does it mean, anticholinergics? We saw here, right? Here, these are the receptors, muscarinic, okay, and also acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is act on these receptors. So anticholinergic means we are going to stop the acetylcholine acting on the M3 receptor. Okay, so by stopping the action of the acetylcholine, we can relax the smooth muscle of the bladder easily. Okay, so for that, on the acetylcholine acts on the muscarinic receptors on the bladder smooth muscle to cause involuntary contraction and provoke the symptoms of bladder overactivity. So these receptors are the target of anticholinergic, as I said. After inhibiting the contractions, it increases the bladder capacity. Okay. So for a man with a frequency, urgency, and urge incontinence, usually it says the diagnosis as a overactive bladder. So when we come across these symptoms and diagnosis, we can consider the anticholinergics. For example, the drugs are oxybutynin, solifenacin, tolterodine, and fluvoxamine. Okay, and also there is a concern that these drugs could precipitate urinary retention. Okay, by relaxing the bladder. Okay, but that risk is very low. So even in men with a urodynamically proven bladder outlet obstruction, we can use this drug. So we usually use fluvoxamine, the brand name is Urispas, 100 to 200 mg 3 to 4 times daily. Okay, and solifenacin is generic, and the Solitan 5 mg can be given. Okay, once daily usually, and maximum. If it is not enough, we think 5 mg is not enough, we can give maximum 10 mg per day. Okay. Then this drug comes, beta 3 adrenoceptors. Anybody can guess where did we see beta 3 receptor? Yes, we saw here. Okay, when beta 3 receptor is activated, bladder relaxes. Okay, bladder will not constrict. In sympathetic, usually beta 3 is activated. So now what do? We should activate, okay, to relax the bladder. Okay, we should stop the M3 activation or stimulate the beta 3 activation. Okay, so it both does the same action, like relaxing the bladder. Okay, so this drug called the mirabegron. We usually give a 25 mg once daily. Okay, causes smooth muscle relaxation by reducing the muscle sensitivity to calcium and can improve bladder storage. Bladder storage improving means it gets more capacity by relaxing the bladder. Okay, without affecting the contraction of the bladder. Okay, usually recommends is when do we recommend? When there is a like a contraindication of antimuscarinic drugs, we can use mirabegron. Okay, so there are we can see the results here. Mirabegron reduces incontinence episodes by 34%, urinary frequency by 44%. What are the contraindications for this specific drug? Severe uncontrolled high BP means we should not use, because this is like a sympathetic activity. Okay, sympathetic. When there is a sympathetic activity is high, the BP is also high. Okay, then side effects are tachycardia and urinary tract infection. By relaxing the bladder, there is a ascending of the bacteria to the bladder also can be occur, and atrial fibrillation, but it's very rare. So one more drug is pyridium. Pyridium, it's a brand name like, okay. Phenazopyridine is the like generic name. It's a we give usually 200 mg TDS. What it does, mechanism action. This agent excreted by the kidney to the like a urinary tract and provides a direct topical analgesic, okay, like local anesthesia effect. True, but we don't know what is the exact mechanism, but we found to know it helps, okay. And for what are the indication? Dysuria. Dysuria means like a painful or burning urination. It is usually given as a symptomatic relief, okay, this drug. What are the side effects? So allergy usually, okay, allergy is the side effect in some cases, so we should avoid this drug. And renal insufficiency, in case of GFR less than 50, we should not give this drug, okay. Contraindication. And headache, nephrotoxicity is rare because it like metabolized and excreted by the kidney, and hemolytic anemia is rare, okay. And so that's it, guys. It's very basic urological drugs. If you want to practice very well, just know the drugs and the doses and also the mechanism. Mechanism, just I recommend you to use this picture, also this picture, so you do understand very well, okay. First understand the mechanism and what should stimulated and what should be inhibited. That is the thing, okay. And we usually relieve the symptoms by using these drugs, okay. So in our urology department, we like these are the like symptomatics and temporary, okay. When there is a point, we should do surgery, okay, for most of the cases. Here medical cases are a bit low, okay. Thank you. Here my mail ID and WhatsApp only, okay. If you have any queries, you can ask here also, and now also I am ready to answer. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, question is, what is your protocol on recurrent multi-drug resistant chronic urinary tract infections in geriatric patients?
Thank you, sir. What is the protocol on recurrent multi-drug resistant? So we don't see usually this multi-drug resistant, because at least for my experience I'm seeing, there are usually one or two drugs, the potent drugs are usually useful, okay. So we can use that easily. We don't see, like, it is not like a TB, we see a multi-drug resistant, okay. Next, please.
Any questions, please? One question is there. I have seen cases with multi-drug resistance, sir.
Multi-drug resistance means, okay, can I know the bacteria? What kind of the bacteria it is, usual or any atypical, like a hospital acquired? In that case, maybe the possible. So we should also rule out the possible cause. What is the possible cause? Maybe the calculi is there, maybe the diabetic, maybe the patient is the diabetes, and also immunocompromised, maybe, because these are the reasons we can get the multi-drug resistant, also the recurrent, okay, recurrence of the infection. So also bladder outlet obstruction, as we discussed already. So we should find out the reason, okay, once again, and we can rectify it, okay.
Any questions? I think people don't have any doubts. They are very clear with your presentation. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thanks for your presentation on common medications. And now we are coming to the end of the session. Thanks everybody. I would thank for your enthusiastic participation in the session. And before winding up, I would like to remind you all once again of a few points. That is, first, the feedback form. Please share your feedback form, and the quiz. Kindly answer the quiz questions. And third thing would be the hands-on training application. So we have shared the link to you. Kindly, Shanu, apply if you are interested. Kindly apply along with your updated resume. Please mail the resume to hr@curie.co.in. So kindly mail your resume to hr@curie.co.in. Once again, we are sending in the chat the questions, the link. So please do note that, and we'll also sharing the link in the WhatsApp group and mail also. So kindly give your inputs so that we can improvise on the session. And anyway, thank you so much. Final thing is we are actually creating an album, Curie alumni album, for which I would request all the participants to share their photo along with the name and the institution name, so that we are planning to have a alumni album at the end of the session, at the end of the 10th day session. So kindly share your photo through our Facebook Messenger at the earliest, so that we can update our photo album. And other thing would be there will be a second evaluation assessment on the final day, that is the 10th day. Similar to the 5th day we had the assessment, similarly we'll be having the questions with the Kahoot applications. So we'll be answering the questions on the Kahoot platform. So we'll be having on Saturday, that is the 10th day session, end of the 10th day session. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow's session.